Continuing the journey onward by Master Outland, Chapter 81. When it rises, fear wasn't anything new to him. Naruto had felt a fear numerous times in his life. A distant memory of crying and screaming when confronted with a grim as a child. Watching Danzo take his mother away, facing Sasuke's brother, and slowly realizing that he was outmatched. And countless times in between those moments that stood out in his life. But this man made him feel a different kind of fear. Not the fear of facing monsters or watching cherished people being threatened. This was dread, a genuine concern that he was in serious trouble, that maybe being dead would be the better alternative to whatever this man had to offer. Lord Orochimaru, and Kimimaro spoke, this boy is more skilled than expected. I can still bring him in, but I can't promise he won't sustain damage. Don't worry, if what I understand about his abilities are correct, and anything short of maiming should be covered by his manipulations healing, just like his mother. His eyes widened and his fingers tightly grasped the storm. The pale man noticed as his serpent tongue slithered out of his mouth. Oh, did that grab your attention? Would you like to come with us now? They knew his mom. Were they working with White Fang? They were part of this investigation. This part of this invasion. His mom was part of this invasion. That should have been obvious, but it hadn't really hit him until now. Was she here? Did they know where she was? Would they know how to lead him to her? They were going to answer him, tossing his kodachi up and snatching it with his glowing hand. Naruto sprinted at his new enemy, Tsukimaru, stepping forward and starting to form another bone blade with his palm. He intercepted Naruto's short sword before another bone formed, and he stabbed for the blonde's eye. Naruto parried the first blade before dodging aside of the next thrust. Following the blade catch his headband and tear it off. They slipped past each other, and Naruto twisted around Kikimaru's back, but the white-haired man had already anticipated his attack, jumping up and whipping out with the kick that got Naruto across the cheek. The fox fungus tumbled into the ground. He laid on his back and ground before he spotted Kikimaru dropping down on him from above. Naruto twisted aside as the young man's bone blades pierced the stone beneath him. Before he could slip away, Naruto grabbed the side of his head and slammed his knee into his ear. Although he shuffled back and gave Naruto the room to get up, he looked unaffected by the knee to the head. Naruto was annoyed by how easily he shook that off, and he could tell his opponent's head was harder from how his knee throbbed, even through his aura. This guy was unnaturally tough and extremely skilled in fighting. As much as he hated to admit it, he wasn't going to win this fight with his skills alone. He needed to outsmart his opponent. Naruto's arm whipped forward, his aura and short sword stretched out to attack Kimaru. The white-haired man easily knocked the blade aside and caused the orange arm to twist off course. But with a stomp of his feet, Naruto reeled his arm back in and around Kimaru's body. He struggled and thrashed around Kimaru. He struggled and thrashed around in the orange aura that bound him together as Naruto captured his foe, until a quick, powerful strike under his rib lifted him off of his feet. Naruto gagged as his trap faltered and Kimaru escaped. He dropped to his knees and gagged on his plate. It was a fist attached to a long, gangly arm that quickly pulled back into Orochimaru's side. The snake had stretched his arm out to attack him. It was just like his manipulation, but instead of making his aura change on a command, the pale man did it with his flesh and bone. It's fascinating, don't you think? How you trained your manipulation semblance is now so similar to my elongation. Orochimaru said with a giggle. Don't you want to see what else you could do? What lengths and limits you could reach? Wouldn't you like to see others share your abilities so you won't be alone? The pale snake looked at him and must have been disappointed in the cold, unfaltering glare he was giving him. Well, that's disappointing. Orochimaru looked over and smiled softly as Minato's unconscious body. Is it because you still have connections? In that case, bastard! Naruto spiked the stormer at the moment the pale man took a step forward towards his father. His blade was knocked into the air as Kimaru stepped in front of it, already on his feet and running. Naruto reached out with his aura and pulled his sword back in as he engaged them in battle. Orochimaru easily stepped away from Naruto's dropping slash before Kimaru stepped in and started swinging. His white-haired man swinging. The white-haired man was fast and agile, attacking from angles Naruto couldn't anticipate him. He raised his arms and guarded against the worst of it before he pushed his way through to attack. Bone fragments and spurs ejected out of nearly every inch of Kimaru's body and stabbed into Naruto. He spun around and sent the blonde funness flying back and onto the ground. The blonde quickly got himself and got up, looking over to see he was closer to his father now. He scrambled over to Minto's side and prepared to lift him up. Don't! Orochimaru's single warning stopped him. He looked over to see them silhouetted by the flames of the ships and courses they had destroyed him. If you run, we'll chase you, and if anyone gets in our way, we'll kill them. Do you really want to be the cause of more of their deaths? A sweat dripped down his forehead before he looked down at his suffering father. He reached out and stretched his aura out like a hand around Minato, gently lifting him up, and Naruto stretched it over to lay Minato down in the grass and bushes. Naruto spun around and slammed an enlarged fist down against the platform. Orochimaru and Kimaru watched in confusion as he slammed his fist down and again, using his aura to increase the size and damage it caused. There was a crack that itched across the platform. Burning debris shifted uncertainly. Orochimaru and Kimaru braced themselves as they felt the ground tilt underneath them. But before Naruto could land the final blow, Orochimaru's hand stretched out and clamped around Naruto's throat viciously. The blonde gasped and struggled for breath as the snake kept him still, and Kimaru dashed in. A giant orange fist slammed down on the stressed point of the platform and toppled over. Instead of pulling back, Naruto charged forward. His aura entangled Kimaru's as the fox tackled Orochimaru in the chest. They fell off Beacon's cliff along with the platform and a dozen burning ships. Hunting. Ruby always wanted to be like the heroes from movies and stories, the hero that stood tall in front of evil, even when the rest of the world nearly tumbled away. Right now, all of that romanticism was lost in the harsh reality of the situation. Belle was falling apart, and there were more Grimm swarming in every second. She was terrified of what Torchwick and Neil would do next. Torchwick, why am I not surprised to see you here after I flew the coop? Ruby kept her sight aimed at Neil and warily looked over to the Master Crook. Did you really turn the robots against everyone? Do you like that? Can't you just imagine me hacking into a secure Atlas mainframe and turning everything they worked so hard for back on them? He chuckled to himself. Man, if I was ever a hacker, I would change the world. I would change the whole industry with my style. What is wrong with you? She yelled as her fingers tightened around Crescent Rosa. Do you know what's going on there? The robots you turned are gunning people down. The Grimm I turned in fell down. You mean the robots Atlas let it kill people, and all the Grimm your sister and friend led here? Why should I stop? Don't just wave it all off like that. Ruby's voice nearly cracked in desperation. Don't you care at all about what is happening down there? That you had a part in it? Torchwick stared at her silently before reaching into his breast pocket. His hand patted around for a few seconds before he realized he didn't have his cigarettes. No, not in the slightest. He wasn't mocking her, but the cold, careless way he admitted that made Ruby freeze. And it was in that moment that Neo wrapped her legs around her neck and yanked her off her feet. Ruby rolled over the top of the flagship and knocked into the rocket locker she had used to get up here. If we weren't up here causing trouble, we'd be down there dying in it. She looked up and stared in shock as the multicolored criminal had changed her appearance to look like the black-haired, pigtailed girl that had fought in the tournament just a few days earlier. This didn't just happen because of us. We just made it easier. Atlas attacking Beacon, bringing the Grimm, stealing the dust, they infiltrating your school to set up the whole thing up. The disguise broke off of Neo as the mute girl smiled. This was always going to end like this. Neo has been a part of the tournament. Mercury had been trying to attack her, and Emerald had been the one to make people see things, which only left to Cinder. Ruby whispered, "What's her part in all this?" The jovial expression faded at the mention of her name. They looked at each other silently before Torchwick pointed his cane at Ruby, preparing to end it. Ruby slammed her hands on the locker controls as jets suddenly ignited. The large hunk of metal rocketed forward, forcing Neo and Roman to move aside as the rocker sailed through the door behind them and into the bridge. If this is what you've chosen to do, Ruby cocked her rifle and put them in her sight. Then I've chosen to stop you no matter what. hunting. How many of these robots are there? The son's anger was shared amongst all the students fighting off the hordes of enemies. Grim numbers had thinned out, but now the knights were picking up the slack. Lee's feet blurred through the metal bodies like paper. Conqueror's wires slipped between the joints as Tamara rolled a gust of wind over them. As powerful the metal peeled off. Amber and Flint quickly joined their side to help them clean up. The Team Sun stayed close together. Neptune and Scarlet handling the robots at range, as Sage and Sun decimated anything that came close to them. Nora knocked the robots aside like dolls with every swing of her hammer. Ren slid through them like a shadow, craving them to pieces along the way. As his teammates obliterated their enemies, John guarded himself against gunfire and sliced up the asteroids as he got closer. And the sounds of crunching metal behind him made him aware that Pyrrha had his back. Despite the circumstances, she smiled and nudged her with his elbow. She smiled and nudged him back. Tintina hooked her sticks together into a staff and knocked every robot over. Fire, ice, wind, and lightning danced around the bunny-haired girl as she destroyed her foes. And she looked around. Kiba barreled through several robots and carried them in front of him. He slid to a stop and lifted them up before tearing them apart with the roar. How are you holding up? I'm alright. Tintin shrugged. Frightened out of my mind, but alright. Have you seen Naruto? He ran after his dad. So where is he? I don't know. That was a while ago, and he said he'd come back when he was done. I'm worried. I don't want us to separate anymore. Then we already. Kiba and Tintin turned to face another wave of incoming robots, but before they could act, the robots were launched up with a series of glyphs. Team Noctix turned and saw the approaching the Sneeze sisters. The Sneeze Harris. Wonderful. Wise side. I guess I'm not the only one dealing with these things. Wise. Tintin laughed with relief. I'm so glad to see you. What took you so long, Princess? Kiba smirked as she frowned at him. We didn't think it'd take this long to find you. Blake and I were working our way through the hordes from the fairgrounds. Things were uncontrollable. She shook her head. We made our way here before spotting some powerful grim. I killed the Ursa and found all of you. So, where's Blake? Hunting? Fear had a grip on her entire body. The way he stood in the fire, the way his hands never left welt and blush as he turned to her, the way he confidently smiled despite the bodies and destruction around him. The man in front of her filled her with pure terror. There was no sign of Adam, the Adam she pictured in her head that fought against inequality and struggled against the dawn so cruelly. And now there was only a darker, cold figure amidst the carnage. The last time you saw me was that day on the train, wasn't it? Adam spoke up, casually striking a conversation with her as if the world around them wasn't toppling over. But I've seen you many times since then. I've been made acutely aware of the hindrances you've been. He took a step forward. Blake dashed to the side, standing on top of some rubble, and aiming her pistol at Hiseda. He stood still within her sight before lowering his head. The chuckle he let out unnerved her. You know, I've only really noticed since you left. But you ran away quite a bit. He drew his sword, and Blake immediately dove aside. The rubble she had stood upon exploded in a cloud of dirt and rock. Her gun shifted into her katana in time to block Adam's sword. Its weight and speed were leagues higher than the force he used when they trained him. Our brothers, you attacked the docks. He started to swing, and Blake had to parry. Sparks flying between them as she was forced back. The rally you invaded. He attacked her from above, and Blake dropped to her knees. The guard you took from our side. His knee lashed out, and Blake's shadow took the hit while she jumped back. Adam's shotgun turned to her face, and she knocked it aside, only for him to slip in and struck her with the sidekick. And finally, you betray us at the breach. Blake flew back, but started to somersault until she recovered. She landed on her feet, both swords in front of her, and shook her head towards her former mentor. What are you doing, Adam? Attacking Beacon, bringing in Grim, killing students. How can you hope to help Faunus when you're killing them too? This is all for a greater purpose, and those that lose their lives today will lose them in pursuit of a better world. How is this better? The world will see what the White Fang has done today, the fortress it has so easily conquered, and they will come to fear our flag and recognize our strength. People around the world will be scared. Blake yelled. They'll attack Faunus in the streets in retaliation. Of course they will. That's how they'll respond at first, but in time the shadow of the White Fang will demoralize all those who approach Faunus. Adam said with certainty before he shook his head. This is why you lost your nerve, Blake. You only had hope of plans that would succeed where everyone was happy and made peace immediately. Your dreams were nothing but delusions, and this is the right way, attacking children, destroying the peace of the whole world. She stared at him and saw no reaction. Adam, you have to see how this is wrong. You have to see that the White Fang, the fights you've chosen, and the people you've hurt are losing their ways. You don't have to follow Donzo's. Donzo doesn't make plans anymore. The dead have little say over our choices. Blake paused to stare at him in shock. Oh, what? I took his position from him days after you left, and ended his life in the process. Adam's caliber attitude faltered for a moment. I felt a relief when he was gone, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss him. I suppose. No matter how they might hurt us, he stared at her. We can't help but keep those we love close to hearts. He killed Danzo and took his position. Well, could she have stopped him before he did it? Could she have stopped this if she hadn't run him? I told you what I've been up to since we separated, Adam hummed. Now, Blake, there are some things you need to answer for. Hunting. After being launched off of a cliff his first day at Beacon, Naruto didn't believe he could be afraid of heights. It turns out falling over a raging sea and ragged rocks rekindled that fear quite effectively. He quickly let go of Orochimaru and Kimura in order to gain some distance from them. He drew out his Kodachi and stabbed into the side of the cliff to slow himself down. And with his aura, he dug into the rock until he finally came to a stop. It was only then that he realized that Orochimaru's outstretched arm was still coiled around his neck, and the sudden pressure on his throat before the feeling weakened left him realizing that he wasn't the only one clinging to the surface. With a strange gasp, Naruto looked down to see Orochimaru was pressing to the rock cliff and unburdened by what just happened. And just a little lower was Kiyomaru, who had stabbed his bone weapon into the rock to slow down. And then multiple bone spires to halt his movement entirely. Fuck! Naruto swore in a rasp. He grabbed the hand and arm around his neck and yanked it off of him. With a scowl, he looked down as he watched it shrink back to normal by Orochimaru's side. Of course, being thrown off a cliff doesn't bother them. Kiyomaru climbed up by stabbing bone spikes from his hands and feeding to the rock. The rest of his spikes retreated back into his body before he launched himself up and scaled the sheer incline with ease. As he drew closer, his fingers bulged and he whipped his hands up. Bondages launched from his fingers and pelted everything around Naruto. The whiskered blonde curled up as bone bullets shattered the rock and impacted over his body. He hissed in pain before he felt what little purchase he had on the cliff start to slip away. The rock cracked and fell away as Naruto suddenly found himself falling. His aura reached out and snagged on a rock before he could plummet. In the middle of his swing back into place, he realized his cold and launched himself at his incoming foe. Kiyomaru braced himself as Naruto's blade stabbed into his side, cutting against the bone armor he formed over his ribs. The force was enough to send them both flying off the cliff and towards the water. Naruto's body was suddenly yanked up before he could fall any further. Orochimaru pulled him in and pinned him into the rock. Come now, young man. Is this resistance really necessary? The snake bonus whispered as his other hand stretched out and caught Kiyomaru. The fact you keep throwing your life away is making me think you don't wish to unlock the secrets of your full potential. Yeah, I'm good. Naruto struggled to push back with the pressure on his back kept him pinned. The blonde fox continued to struggle in vain as he groaned. Who are you people? Why are you doing this? You don't need to know the specifics, but you and your cohorts have had some run-ins with my peoples over the last few months. Orochimaru answered. In fact, your little adventures have lost some of them taking their own lives, which I found both impressive and annoying. The boy that killed himself at the White Fang rally, the girl that let herself be consumed by the Grim. This bastard was the one in charge of those people helping the White Fang prepare for all of this. Why? I told you that the specifics aren't necessary at the moment. Just know that we have been watching you for quite a while, and as for the people we've lost, the loss was always acceptable. A small snicker filled Naruto's ear, but we hope to honor them with a few friends of yours instead. He snapped. It didn't matter what they were. It didn't matter that they were hanging on the side of a cliff, or that Grim were filling the air around them, or even that he was outnumbered or outmatched them. He needed to make these people pay. Naruto slammed his hand into the rock and channeled his aura. He forced the orange outline to grow a dozen times in size and crumbled the rock he was pinned against. In that moment, where he lurched forward and Orochimaru's pinned weakness, the young huntsman slipped away. away. Firing a dust arrow into his palm. He channeled electricity to his aura. His fist launched out and stretched blistering speeds towards the snake furnace. Orochimaru let go of the cliff and dropped down before his fist could smash his head. The snake twisted and threw Kimura at Naruto as a young furnace grabbed the wall to stop his descent. As Kimura flew closer, Naruto raised his stormer in a shower of sparks. Naruto looked back to see Kiyomaru dig into the rock and stop his fall. He followed up by extending a bone through his feet like spikes and burying them into the stone until he could run up like it was solid ground. Naruto jumped and used his aura to help him maneuver around the determined fighter. He heard the sounds of something whizzing through the air and shattering fog behind him. With a twist in the air, he deflected some of the bones being fired at him and shot several arrows in return. Kiyomaru made to deflect them, but when he did, he was hit with an explosion of and rush of ice. Naruto's moments of victory was short-lived. As his ears perked up, he looked back and then leapt off the cliff. When Orochimaru swung himself over, the young fox resorted to reach out with his aura and swing over the cliff surface to evade the persistent old man. Swinging around and firing some dust arrows, he could only watch in shock as the strange pale man moved with unnatural ease and grace around his projectiles. Even though he wanted to make them pay, Naruto found himself keeping his distance. Orochimaru chased him like a man possessed. His arms lashing out like whips as he chased the young blonde. With an outstretched arm, he snapped up over the rock and flew by Naruto before he could get away. The snake furnace turned around and brought his fist down like a hammer. Naruto dodged the side away when he attacked and stabbed for his flank. But the older man caught his wrist and knocked his head back with the fist. The whisker blonde slipped off of his grip and slashed at the older man. But Orochimaru bent backwards and whipped back in with a headbutt. The blonde saw stars for a moment and shuffled over the rocks to escape Orochimaru's pursuit. The snake's fist and elbows struck every spot in Naruto's head. Was a moment earlier. Naruto desperately escaped, jumping back and climbing around before Orochimaru kicked so hard rock folded like paper around his foot. The older man's face was pinched and the leg let out a mechanical hiss. While Naruto was distracted, Kiyomaru rushed in and slammed into his back. He was sent flying forward into Orochimaru's grip as the older fawn smirked like a blur. Naruto was slammed into the cliffside. He let out a pain gasp before he was slammed again, not cracking the stone until it finally came to a stop. Naruto was panting and struggling for air. Orochimaru's grip around his throat tightened with every second. Even with his aura up, he felt an aching pain through his body, but he kept a grip on his kodachi in his hand and his semblance around his other. He opened his eyes to see Orochimaru smiling down at him. There, your rebellion was admirable, but it has tired itself out. Orochimaru leaned in closer. The school will fall. That is inevitable. Instead of fighting that unchangeable fate, why not join me? Naruto tried to stab him in the eye, but a quick shot from Kiyomaru's finger knocked it off course. Orochimaru sighed and slammed his head back again, tightening his grip on the young huntsman's throat before turning and pulling Naruto out. Suddenly, without the cliff at his back, Naruto looked down to see Orochimaru was holding him over the water. At any moment, the snake could drop him and doom him to a watery death. Your resiliency is starting to shift from impressive to irritating. I don't wish to damage you any more than I have to, so stop fighting and submit. Naruto looked up with clouded eyes as he hung precautiously over the water. Orochimaru's grip keeping him alive. He looked up at the edge of the cliff where his father was resting in the grass. Some distance from that, his friends and teammates were holding the line. And nearly a mile above, grim of all kinds filled the sky's black expanse. So many grim. I hate you, Naruto whispered, earning Orochimaru and Kiyomaru's attention. I hate you so much. I wanted to fight with my friends, fight with my father, do good, and instead I'm here, fighting you also. I hate this, and I hate you. Naruto gripped the hands around his neck and started kicking wildly. I hate the people who did this. I hate that my friends were hurt because of your plans, and I hate you. Orochimaru's eyes widened in realization. Naruto smiled in victory. And suddenly, Grim dove down to the air and swarmed to the side of the cliff. Orochimaru and Kimaru looked around in shock. Naruto, at the center of the negativity and their prime target, started to pry the hand off his neck as the griffin flew for his head. He put Orochimaru's stretched limb between himself and the bloodthirsty beast. Its beak snapped down on the snake's wrist and freed him from its grip. As Orochimaru howled in pain and tried to pull his arm back, Naruto extended his oar and pulled him back into the cliff. When he was beside the struggling man, he drew Stormer to his side and stabbed it into the old man's leg. He wasn't sure if it was the mechanical brace or an artificial limb, but it spewed sparks and fire all the same. Master! Kimaru tried to help, but Naruto grabbed him by the collar and pulled him along as he scaled the cliff. The bone-wielding killer cried out as Orochimaru cursed while being swarmed with Grim. Naruto left it all behind as he grabbed hold of the cliff's edge and pulled him over. Master Orochimaru! No, you don't! Naruto pinned Kimaru to the ground. I don't know who you are, but you're a fucking pain for what you've done tonight. Let me go. I have to help him. It's too late now. No, it's not. Bone spires ejected out of his body and knocked Naruto off. Before he could get back up, Kimaru scrambled to his feet and dove off the cliff and into the grim horde below. Fine, die. See if I care. As Naruto sped in derision, he quickly jumped to his feet. He ran over to the patch of grass by Beacon's wall. Dad! Naruto was still unconscious, eyes closed with raspy breath. Now that he was in panicking, Naruto noticed the burns around his collarbone and neck. He reached out and gently touched his father's head, feeling a modicum of relief when he felt him turn into his palm. It's okay. I won't let anything hurt you. Hunting. They were doing well to take back the courtyard. Teams were taking roles in handling the hordes of robots and Grim, either rounding them back, either rounding them up, or decimating them when they were grouped together. Everyone was amazing and doing such a good job. Velvet in particular, if someone had told him that nice shy rabbit girl was a total badass with a plethora of hologram weapons at her disposal, he never would have believed it. John, watch out! The paladin aimed at him and he quickly raised his shield. Before it attacked, its legs were knocked off balance with the glyph. It lashed out with a fist, but Kiba caught him, taking the brunt of its force with his ferrule, as others reduced it to scrap. Pierre quickly ran over. John, you can't get distracted like that. Sorry, he apologized. I didn't mean to lose focus. I was just I just want to make sure you're okay. It was bad enough with the Grim, but these mechs are pushing us. I can hold them back for a few seconds. But there's too much for your polarity to handle at once. He understood his best friend's frustration. He looked around and tried to make a plan before he heard a frightened screaming and a familiar shotgun blast. Wait, what's that? This way. Stay together. John and Pierre looked over, spotting a group of civilians being led by Yang. The blonde killed anything that approached as she led the group into Beacon's entrance. Yang, they called out. Thank God you're okay. No one has heard from you. I found a bunch of people still in Beacon that were pinned down. The brawler seemed winded and wiped her cheek. I've been making a round all over the campus. There was this huge group from one of the landing zones that said someone blew up the ships. What? So then we've got to clear out this landing zone to get any ships to Beacon. Things are going from bad to worse. We'll manage. Yang looked between them. Have you guys seen my team? Why is this over there? Pierre pointed back to where Kiba was holding onto a paladin's fist as Wise and the others distorted him. And Ruby? What about Ruby? Yang panicked. She said she was going to take care of something, but disappeared on Amity. We tried reaching her, but she didn't have her scroll. That news left Yang reeling. I should look to the floating coliseum. She can handle herself, Yang. I don't think any of us can handle this. She snapped back. And Blake? Why say they separated while chasing after Grim? She went towards the cafeteria. Yang, I'm going to look for her. The young brawler was already sprinting and making her way around the school. Pierre looked at him with concern as he huffed and turned to civilians. Everyone, please stay calm. I know this is scary, but we are clearing the court. Once we do, airships and bulkheads will arrive. That's not good enough. I'm sorry. I don't know their plan. Can't you do what that man Faunus boy we're going to do? Fight that thing off? What? The fighting boy were too busy panicking to give him a proper explanation. His eyes turned to his one hope, the girl who looked to still have some composure as she gently squeezed Swai to her chest. Do you know what they're talking about? I've only got bits and pieces. I think Naruto and Mr. Minuto were going to try and handle the monster up there, Sakura said. But before they could, something happened to the ships. John felt his stomach turned in horror. He swallowed the lump in his throat and tried to focus. Pierre, what should we do? I think they'll be saving the entryway with everyone outside, and Naruto might need our Pierre. He turned in time to see her partner walk away from the group. Standing in front of her was Osman, the headmaster, wearing a somber expression as he led her towards the elevators, ordering everyone to stay together. John chased after his headmaster and partner before it was too late. As they stepped into the elevator and while the doors closed, he slipped in. Pierre, John, what are you doing? You can't just walk away like that. And Professor, we need your help. We don't know what to do, and the people are freaking out. And the young huntsman paused as he realized that they weren't going up and towards his office, but downwards instead. Where are we going? Mr. Arca, Osman spoke softly. I know how bad the situation is, but I believe something far worse is coming, and right now, in order to have a hope in stopping this, we need to put our focus elsewhere. What are you, John? Everyone else faded away when he heard Pierre's voice. The uncertainty and tremble in it reminded him of the way she had been acting before, when she was scared and terrified, and he had no idea how to help her. He turned to see watery eyes and a complicated expression look up at him. Pierre stepped up to him and hid her face in her chest. Pierre, please, she whispered, almost pleaded, so softly he almost didn't hear her. Please stay with me. Frightened about how she was acting, he turned to Osman for answers, but all he saw was the older huntsman had turned aside as he gripped his king tightly. Was that a shame? As the elevator traveled down, John raised his arm and cradled the girl close to his body. He didn't know where they were going, but the fact that these two seemed so worried frightened him more than any grim invasion. Fighting people was a completely different beast to fighting not mindless screams. Neil charged at her while dragging her thin blade along the ship's surface. Ruby dashed to meet her and swept at her feet. And again, with startling dexterity, the little girl leapt and sprung the air to perfectly dodge her attack. While thrusting her blade into Ruby's shoulder, her aura flared and she snapped back up to catch the criminal in her descent. Crescent Rose twirled around in her body and attacked, only for Neil to slip away. Flipping over the low swings and then dropping into a split to avoid the high ones. She thrusted her parasol up and knocked her scythe away. Ruby felt a swell of frustration before anchoring her scythe and firing her rifle. Again, Neil deftly dodged her shots, twirling around the bullet's path before she sheathed her blade and opened her parasol to deflect the rest. The shorter girl twirled her umbrella on her shoulder before spinning around to face Ruby. She stood still and blew raspberry. Was she daring her to take a shot? Failing to suppress the growl through her teeth, Ruby cocked her weapon and decided to oblige her. She cocked the bolt and fired a shot that sailed through the air and pierced through Neil's head. The little killer was reduced to shards of glass, and as the illusion was shattered, the reveal that Toshwick stood behind it with his weapon pointed at Ruby shocked the young hunters. The ball of fire flew through the air and exploded against Crescent Rose. She was blown off her feet and rolled along the ground before finally skidding to a stop. Her body ached through her aura, and she lifted herself up with her weapon in hand, but froze when the sound of metal clicked behind her. Neil's blade was pointed at Ruby's head. It thrusted forward and snagged on Ruby's hood, cutting the red fabric as Ruby made a frenzied dash to the side. The young student tried to catch her breath and prepared to fire at them again while she had the distance, but she felt a sharp, powerful tug on her wrist that yanked her off her feet. She looked down to see Milachi Cuddle's hook had snagged her arm while she was retreating. Before she could pry the hook off, she was pulled off of her feet, flying through the air. Ruby could only look up in time to see Toshwick's arm race to catch her neck with the clothesline. You know, Red, Toshwick spoke as she gagged and gasped for air. I'm kind of sad to see this come to an end. It's sobering to think after all this is over, I won't be dealing with you anymore. I'll miss you, Red. Not like something I care about or even give a second thought to, but more like a nasty growth you can't believe was finally taken off. Neil slightly giggled to herself. They slowly strolled towards the struggling young huntress. So long, Red. Don't come any closer. Ruby mumbled, struggling to pull herself up as she reached for a new magazine. She unloaded her rifle and tried to reload the next mag, but before she could clip it in, Neil's boot swung into her cheek and knocked her across the ground in a bodily heap. "Ah, poor Red. This is just sad." Toshrik said pitifully. "Neo, I think we're done playing around. Finish it quickly, okay?" Neo smiled and slowly drew her sword as she stalked towards Ruby. The hooded girl panted and reached for another magazine. She pulled one out, loaded it, and aimed her. Toshrik just laughed as Neo continued forward, ready to dodge or block whatever came her way. Surprised and narrowed as she fired, only to miss both criminals. It did, however, hit the gravity magazine as she dropped earlier. A violent explosion of energy erupted between the two criminals. Toshrik was knocked over as a wave of gravity kept him grounded, and Neo was blown off of her feet, sent flying off the top of the flagship and flailing through the sky without purchase. Toshrik growled and fought against the force, pushing him down before it finally dissipated. He reached out. Neo! He saw his loyal companion fall from the dust side effect and dropped to the air. "You!" Toshrik turned around with a snarl. "You bitch!" The orange-haired criminal roared as Ruby stood back up. "I'll kill you! That terrible feeling in your gut that you can't believe. That's what everyone down there is feeling right now. What you chose to make them feel." Ruby growled back, squealing off with a homicidal crook. "Just stop now so I can put an end to this. Shut up! Shut your goddamn mouth!" Toshrik sprinted forward with a yell. Ruby's eyes narrowed as she rushed forward and spun her scythe around her body. Her blade bladed edges slashed against the side of Toshrik's cane in rapid succession in an attempt to push him back. The orange-haired crook strained against her assault as he yelled, "You'll pay for this!" His cane caught her side before he slammed the end of it down between her feet, releasing a massive blast of fire that knocked Ruby away. The crook caught around her neck and pulled her back into his fist. Toshrik didn't hesitate for even an instant and beat her viciously while she was in reach. "I'm sick of you constantly getting in my way." His fist knocked her head back and finally out of his hold. "You and your little friends always intervene, trying to play storybook heroes." Ruby tried to sit up, but his boot swung into her chest and caused her to double over. "Well, do you want to know a secret about what it really means to be a huntress, Red? They fight, they lose, and when they die, What's wrong, Toshrik?" Ruby mocked with a pained expression. "You sound scared. Oh, don't worry about me, kid." She struggled to look up as the master crook clapped his cane against his palm. "Because unlike you and all your friends who with death wishes, I aim for survival." He slowly approached her, casting a large shadow over her. "No matter what I'm up against, I'll come out on top. No matter who we face, I'll escape, and no matter what it is, what it comes from me, I'll survive." Ruby stared up at the crook that overshadowed her, and then quickly realized it wasn't him that was casting the shadow. Ruby grabbed her scythe and dove to the side. He looked back in time to see Torture. She looked back in time to see Torture's confused expression turn to horror as a massive Nevermore collided into his back and tackled him into the ship's bridge. The young hunters watched as the center of the ship went up in flames and exploded. Whatever the Grim had destroyed was now causing the flagship to shift out of the sky. Ruby watched as the level surface of the ship started to tilt on its axis until it was falling down at an angle. No! Running to the edge and leaping off the ship, Ruby dropped down towards Beacon. She struggled to grab hold of the bolt of her rifle before she fired downwards. Encountered the downwards force with the sheer recoil of her gun. Ruby dropped slower through the air with a spare shot fired every few seconds to stop herself from reaching terminal velocity. Her fingers nervously twitched and pulled the trigger of her rifle as her landing strategy came closer and closer to completion. Her legs hit the ground and nearly broke under the force of the drop falling into a roll and losing the grip of her weapon. Ruby bounced off the ground at once. She lay on the pavement, gasping for air as she heard Crescent Rose collided to the side. She raised her head and looked up as the flagship she had stood on not 2 minutes earlier fell from the sky. Would this help anyone? Hey, guessing that's your mess, right? Ruby flinched and turned around, ready to fight her. Her body relaxed as she realized it was Naruto and not another enemy that had found her. She paused when she saw how tired he was and that he was piggybacking in unconscious mental. "What happened to you?" "My mess." Hunting with every robot that came into view, he destroyed it with a shot. With each one that got closer, he destroyed it under his fist. He should be annoyed by how easily they were broken, but considering the circumstances, he couldn't be happier. The general's attention shifted to across the city block, the city Kroglinda, and other familiar faces cleaning the streets of robots in Grimm. And on the far side, he could see the and Gurren doing their part, keeping with all of them. A loud explosion echoed up above, followed by the ominous creak of metal. He looked up and watched as the only remaining flagship in his armada fell from the sky with a flaming plume behind him. It was a harrowing sight to see another of his ships crash before he could reclaim it and hope to mitigate some of the damage. But then all the corrupt Legion knights on the street stopped and powered down. He considered counting his blessings. I guess someone already had the idea of storming the ship, Jiraiya noted, looking down to see his outdated prosthetic sparking and acting up. We are gonna be even worse off with that thing down, are we? And now we have no central hub to deploy ships and engage in aerial combat, which means that Wyvern is still an issue. Arnwood reloaded his gun. But all things considered, I'm glad that Shanghai ship is out of the air. And Crow cracked his neck. I'm glad to see all of the little toy soldiers came down for the count, and we're sure that they aren't gonna pop back up again. The knights and paladins were being controlled from terminals on the flagships where they could be monitored and updated. Whatever it was that turned them came from one of those terminals. And now that the ship is down, hopefully, with torch rickets still inside it, they're worthless. No time to sound bitter, James. Once again, Glinda put him focus on the task at hand. These robots are deactivated, but we still have the Grim to deal with them. Right, Gurren Daedra, report. Yes, sir. Gurren came running over at attention as Daedra took his time. We were patrolling the city limits with our team when the incident occurred. I raised a defensive line of crystals before I had to retreat and make a wall of it instead. It held them off temporarily, but they forced their way through. We tried to deter them, but they just weren't stopping. Daedra continued. When it was clear we weren't going to stop at the speed, we moved on to warning the immediate district. While we were doing that, we caught sight of some bulkheads collecting Grim and transporting them around, along with the White Fang members. White Fang? That's right. The former vigilante nodded. Ironwood looked around and saw the expressions on his comrades' faces, especially Jiraiya and Tsunade, at the distressing news, which means shit's only gonna get worse if we don't find those fuckers and take them out quick. Daedra, Union recruits have attitude, Jimmy. Crow snickered. I kinda like it. Ironwood groaned and was about to rebuke his comrade before he spotted Glinda. The blonde huntress was staring at him intently behind her glasses. Glinda, is something the matter? Found myself extremely disappointed. At what? Really, James? His old friend responded indignantly while fixing her glasses up. You're not even going to admit it. You're going to treat me like a blind, dumb fool unless I come out and ask. Glinda, why are they here, James? Her riding crop swung out to point at the Gurren. Why are they wearing your army uniforms? Why are you treating these criminals that assaulted and kidnapped my students like your subordinates? He didn't need to look at Crow, Jiraiya, and Tsunade's eyes to turn to the two soldiers. Crow disbelief carried in his voice. That was these two were part of that. We aren't criminals, Daedra stated unhelpfully as he took a stand. We were fighting against the White Fang while everyone else was on their asses. What we did was necessary. That's rich. Crow stomped his way over with murder in his eyes. You use that excuse every time you endanger children. Stop, please. Gurren stood between them and had a hand on Daedra's chest before things could escalate. I know what we did in the past is unforgivable, but we're trying. Don't apologize for anything, Gurren. What we did may not sit well with them, but we're the reason so many White Fang attacks didn't turn into massacres. It was them. They're the ones made to fight at the dust rig. The old toad raised his hand, ready to release a shockwave. No, Ironwood slid in just as Daedra leveled his hand in retaliation. Everyone stand down. What the hell were you thinking, James? Crow snapped. I was thinking that letting a group of specially trained, powerful, and capable fighters on the wrong path rot in jail would be a waste. I thought I could give them a chance to put their abilities to better use for the fight ahead. All of our fights ahead. He said that while staring directly at Glinda and Crow, knowing what they did about the danger they faced, he hoped they understood why he did what he did. That when faced with a threat as terrible as the Queen of Grim, any alternative, no matter how troublesome, was preferable. Judging by their eyes, they did feel the same. James, these people shouldn't be parading around in your clothes, toting any grand plans you have to save people. They should be in prison, serving their time for what they've done and the people they hurt. Glinda said resolutely, leaving no room to argue. Gordon, however, didn't share that sentiment. We were only trying to help how we could. We're doing that now. I know we have a lot to make up for, but this is our way of doing that. Make it right. Crow scoffed. You don't get to make your rounds and say sorry. You made your choices, and now you live with them. They don't just disappear. Enough. Onward echoing command silence all of them in an instant. They would really waste their time arguing about this. He shook his head. I will not hear another word of it. I know this might not sit well with all of you. I know you might question me, but I don't care. I made a choice. I thought it would work for the better, and it has. These criminals you so readily can condemn have fought by our sides and stood their ground in this crisis. That tells me more than anything that this was the right choice to make. James, no. In the fight ahead, we will need any and every advantage we can take, even the ones that make us uncomfortable. Sometimes the best choices, the right choices, are the ones we have to stomach. The powerful trumpet of the Goliath's trunk shook the ground around them. They all turned to see the giant grim crescent over the top of the buildings. As it barreled through, one building was knocked off of its foundation and started dropping down towards them. Move! Onward, and the others were blown off of their feet by a powerful explosion as the debris came down. The general slammed into the street and immediately rolled into a crouching stance. He looked over. Oh no! Deidre! A girl cried out as she slid to the bomber's side. He was pinned under the massive slab of stone and rebar that covered most of his body. Just hold on. Just wait. Glinda raised her clamp. I'll move the rubble off him. The instant the rock shifted, he started coughing blood. Stop! They froze in shock as Tsunade knelt by the other side and looked him over. She leaned in closer to hear his wet, uneven breathing and pressed her fingers to his neck. Going gasped in horror when the doctor shook her head. Hey, we got Grim incoming! And Crow called out as he fired at the approaching beast. Onward quickly drew his pistol and assisted him. Whatever we need to do it quick. There has to be something, right? Gurn asked desperately as she focused on her wheezy partner. We have to help him. I'm sorry, but there isn't anything we can do like this. If we weren't in the middle of an attack, it would be risky. But right now, no, that isn't going to be good enough. Whatever I need. Oh God, shut the fuck up. The wheezing curse was followed by a bloody cough. The blonde hissed. Fuck that stings. Look, you can't do anything, Gurn. Leave it be. Get out of here and go do some good. I'm not leaving you. Well, that's just stupid. He chuckled, letting a little more blood come down his lips. Whatever was left of his aura was straining the moment it did the damage, or would only get worse. He raised his hand and let some fire pop out of his palms. General, yes sir. Fuck, I hate that. Lila looked up at him with fading eyes. Take her away. I can clear out a good chunk and give us some time. That's not happening. Gurn denied with tears running down her cheeks. We don't leave soldiers behind. Right, General? Right. Gurn looked up at him and silently pleaded, but he gave her no answer. She shook her head. I'm not leaving him. The other side. God, you're stubborn, bitch. Sometimes you really want to help me. Yes. Then find some other crazy stubborn bitch that can put up with you and live well. Okay. While Gurn was shocked by his request, Anu stepped in and scooped her under his arm. We're retreating. No. A pink crystal shot up from the street in an effort to stop him from falling back and leaving their dying comrade. As Jirai called them over and Gurren cried out for her partner, the girl held his hand towards the oncoming horde. He laughed, yelled something about art and hunting. There was a massive explosion that erupted several city blocks away from them. The giant flagship crashed into the ground in his peripheral. Cardinal handled the White Fang members that filled the street. They were outnumbered, but the team was adamant to show their hard-earned skills from Beacon. Gar held off the old furnace as he created lava off to the side. The red-haired woman focused the fire wielder on her back foot with the preemptive strike. And Sasuke stood silently across from Han as he copied the horse's furnace semblance and coated his body in purple aura. The noble guard seethed in anger and took a stance. Sasuke felt a need to once more call out and plead to the man to lay his weapons down. But the mind-numbing pain of his mangled hand under his armpit reminded him that Han had made his choice. Lucia slowly raised his sword with the blade pointed out. Han responded in kind, putting up his fist and dropping his stance. The two cloaked men, the two aura cloaked men, stood in silence as battles raged around them, and destruction reigned in the city. The streets erupted in a hail of pavement as they launched towards each other. Sasuke's blade clashed with Han's gauntlets hard enough that a shockwave reverberated around them. Han pressed against his sword with ludicrous power and speed. Sasuke felt to swell up in every inch of his body. He slid aside and let the large furnace trip past him as he stumbled forward. Sasuke spun and struck him with a spinning back kick. Han was sent flying across the street and into the side of a car, detonated with his body. Sasuke immediately rushed the horse furnace before he could recover. The power of his semblance was unlike anything he had felt before. The strength welling up as he tensed his body was several times more than anything he could reach at his peak. It was similar to the rush Yang's burn and Kiba's Pharaoh gave, but it was constant and overwhelming. And unlike Naruto's semblance, he didn't lose control when he had this power. Unfortunately, he realized he still didn't have enough control. Sasuke went sailing towards Han with just a jump. The noble guard pulled himself out of the car and avoided his rush, grabbing his ankle as he passed by and slamming him into the street. Sasuke was dragged along the street before being violently tossed into the side of a building, or shielded him from injury, but he felt his reserves taking a hit. Sasuke! The young swordsman looked up as Han was blocked by a wall of sand. Sasuke looked over as Gaara ran to his side while holding up the wall. I told you to retreat. I'm not standing down. You're hurt. You only make it worse. A prideful roar erupted as Roshi dove into the wall of the sand and melted through it. Sasuke and Gaara quickly separated as the ape landed beside them and pressed his hand into the building. The stone and mortar holding it up quickly overheated until they became molten rock. As the shadow of the tilted body loomed over him, Sasuke dropped into a squat and braced himself. Purple steam rushed off his body before he jumped into it like a rocket. The remains of the building cracked and shattered as he barreled through it completely. Han had leapt up as well to meet him in the air. The giant man cupped his hands together and brought them down on Sasuke. The blow landed and he went flying back into the street, creating the ground when he landed on his feet. Feel the power behind every movement. Be aware that every move was now several times more powerful. While Han dropped back out of the air, Sasuke took the chance to acclimate and understand the semblance he was using. A rush of heat came swarming towards his side. Before the blue flames could reach him, a red hand stretched out in front of him and shielded him from the fire. The red fox woman jogged over to his side as she kept the flames at bay. The other hand shot out behind him. He looked back in time to see her auras ensnare Han before he could get any closer. The large fox thrashed and cursed before he was lifted up, thrown into the buildings across the block. As she held off the most violent of the group, Sasuke took a deep breath and gripped his sword tightly. Sasuke slipped out from behind her protection and charged the blue woman throwing fire. The young cat panicked and turned the flames on him. He slid aside and avoided the path of her streams, slipping in closer and closer until the hilt of his sword hit her stomach. As she doubled over the air, he struck her in the side of the chest and sent her dropping into the street. Han's bellowing roar echoed over the street as he charged. Uchiha! Come on! While Han crossed the distance between them in one powerful bounce, Sasuke twisted his katana around and readied his stance for battle. He leapt away, leaving Han to slam into the street and splinter it. As white steam rushed off his body with the buildup of power, Sasuke did the same with a rush of purple steam. He watched the his every movement, the way he tensed his shoulders and braced his arms as power filled them up, the way his legs shifted to change his center of gravity before a charge, the way the steam focused and shot out more narrowly when the strength was at its peak. Sasuke noticed all of these little changes in Han's movement and matched them. Both men charged at each other, crossing blade and fist this time instead of colliding together. Sparks flew during their cross and they slid to a stop before diving back in. Sasuke ducked beneath Han's destructive fist and struck up into his chin when he had the chance. The white fang leader roared and attempted to stomp him into a paste. Sasuke kicked off the ground and escaped as Han's foot broke the blacktop. Slabs of pavement jutted up and Han smacked them towards Sasuke. The young huntsman slid them apart until they exploded into rumble. Han rushed in during that opportunity and kicked for his head. As the foot sailed for his head, Sasuke instinctively knew the path it was going to take. He dropped to the ground as the leg swung over his head, and when Han's path was complete, Sasuke snapped back up and barreled into the large man's man's chest. With the primal scream, the young Uchiha rushed forward and slammed his enemy through sand and fire until they hit a wall. Not bothered by the wall that crumbled around them, Han slammed his fist down into Sasuke's back before tossing him aside. And Sasuke quickly planted his feet and slid to a stop before looking back up with narrowed eyes. Han roared and lunged at him with his fist reeled back. Sasuke rushed in with his sword chambered by his side. The two men met and attacked simultaneously. The devastating punches slammed into the side of Sasuke's head as he felt his brain shake through his enhanced aura, and his sword lunged out with thrust digging into Han's throat while he was open. Another shockwave reverted through the air as they were blown away from each other. The katana slipped from Sasuke's hand as he bounced against the ground and slammed into the sidewalk's curb. He felt a sharp throbbing through his skull, and the pain in his hand flared up as the purple layer around his body broke and floated away. As he struggled for air and his body became heavy, he looked over. Han was picking himself up as his white aura disappeared as well. The giant horse was left winded and struggling for balance. It was probably rare for his aura to ever be fully depleted. Despite his lack of aura and the fatigue he must have felt, Han's eyes focused on him and narrowed. He lowered his fist and activated the blades on his gauntlets. Sasuke picked himself up slowly. "Please stop. We're both done. We don't need to go any further." Han shook his head. "I've come this far. I'm so close to helping Faunus move a little further ahead. Stopping now would be worse than anything else. Going forward like this is the worst thing you could do. I won't stop." Han sprinted across the street and rushed towards Sasuke. The exhausted huntsman looked up and stood his ground as he tried to think what he could do. Han grew closer every second, and he had no idea how to escape. He prepared to move. "Uchiha!" The voice from his side drew his attention as his katana sprung through the air and back towards him. As it approached, Han drew closer and raised his fist. The massive man came down upon him and threw his fist at Sasuke's head. The Uchiha fell to the side, partly dodging and partly collapsing from the exhaustion. But as he passed by Han's other flank, he held out his hand. His katana landed on his palm, and he twisted his whole body around. A silver flash dug into Han's arm and neck. Hunting. They had all been left silent after watching the clash between the Uchiha and the noble guard. The battle had started with three monsters fighting the three more monsters, while young huntsmen fought a wave of foolish volunteers into deep. But as she fought Jujito and the other boy held back Roshi, the Uchiha and Han laid waste to everything around them. The fight had been interrupted and tossed aside as they had to avoid the two powerhouses. The powerhouses duel. They were beaten and depleted of aura. Han had no doubt shocked that he had been pushed this far in battle, and Uchiha no longer able to hide just how much pain he was in. But even so, Han prepared to finish the fight in his empty state. The boy spoke up and asked him to stop. Han ignored him and rushed in for the kill. That's when she threw his sword. Kushina knew what was going to happen the moment she gave that desperate young man his weapon back, and it came to pass the very next instant. The sword swung down, unimpeded by the obstacles in his path. As everyone watched in silence, Han's arm plopped to the ground. A second later, his head bounced off the pavement after that. The massive man's body dropped to the street as the Uchiha kept standing. His sword hung by his side, blood running off the end of it as he caught his breath. Mr. Han? Oh God, he actually killed him. He killed one of the noble guards. The noble guards had been a staple of Remnant's existence for ages, even if they never lived up to the stories or in the public eye. Even after all these years, there was always some version of the 9 great Faunus heroes who stood up for the downtrodden and hopeless. But unless Han had a secret child or relative he didn't know about, one of them had been erased from the world. The boy had killed the mountain breaker. He turned and raised his blade out at the remaining forces. They all watched with bated breath as his sword glittered with the leader's blood. Leave! Tired, beaten, broken, depleted, this boy who probably couldn't even throw another punch or ordered a vanguard force of White Fang to run and never come back. It took them a few seconds to follow his command. Yujito looked at the fallen form of her comrade once more before Roshi grabbed her shoulder and pulled her along. It was only a few more seconds until they were gone from sight. They probably should have chased after them, and Kushina felt like she had to capture them properly, but she felt, along with the rest of them most likely, that they should just just be happy that they were finished with the fight. Sasuke, Uchiha! The huntsman team came rushing over to join the Faunus as they checked their injured comrade. What the hell? I thought the plan was to distract them and get him the hell out of here. The red-haired raccoon grimaced. We were cut off. I tried to pull him away from it, but he was adamant. Carton, his hand is seriously. I can see that. The biggest boy Barker before lifting the Uchiha up. Help me move him. There's got to be a medical center somewhere. The Uchiha watched them move from the side as they flitted about their friend and tried to help him. She turned and looked around the immediate area to see all that damage it had sustained in the battle. The further she looked out, the more smoke and fire she saw until she spotted the wyvern circling beacon. She was finally free. She had finally found the courage to pull herself away from the White Fang. Damned to be the consequences. But now, this horror, this evil, because she was complicit, because she let it happen, she closed her eyes and walked away. He never stopped looking for you. Finding you, getting you back, bringing you home. It drove them both. They never stopped thinking about you. Kushina looked back at the Uchiha as he was propped on the larger huntsman's back while they retreated to a safe place. He stared at her unflinchingly, refusing to buckle or show any sign that what he said was a lie. That was enough for tears to relief to come to her eyes. She wiped them away, only for more to come, welling back up. Kushina nodded to the injured boy. Please, keep watching over him for just a little longer. She turned and walked into the city and into the mess that she made him. Hunting, did you ever think you'd see anything like this? When I decided to follow Cinder, I had prepared myself for anything, even this, but still. It's a lot. Yeah, kind of make me glad I didn't eat anything. Mercury and Emerald agreed on that as they stood on a vantage point and filmed everything they could find. What they captured was being streamed for the rest of the world to see, and what they were seeing would truly leave them terrified. It was sobering to think they had a hand in turning the world upside down. But at least they were on the side that kept its balance. Hey, look! Mercury's scroll zoomed in as he caught a load of students fighting off the last scream that covered the court. I guess the curse is a good guy, so one after all. Cinder is going to be happy they made it. Wherever she was, they were going to have to deal with her annoyance once she came back. Should we go down there and... No need. Mercury chuckled as he zoomed in on the approaching figure. The star has arrived. Hunting. Ha! Weiss gave one more yell as she swung her rapier and pierced the last scream in front of her. As the beast faded to nothing in front of her, the Ares allowed herself to sag as she caught her breath. This is exhausting. It's okay. Captain panted by her side as she kept a firm grip on her sticks. I think that's the last of them. Hey, you two, take a break. Kiba called out to them against the side of a fallen paladin. Catch your breath now. No! Attendant sternly barked as Weiss nodded beside her. Have you even recovered any of your aura yet? The tattooed boy proved his instrument in picking off the last of the paladin units before they suddenly became inert. However, in fighting the giant mechs and catching their attacks, his aura slowly depleted until it broke entirely. Now he was left to sit on the sidelines and keep a lookout for them. But Weiss shrugged, unbothered by how annoyed he might be when his life was in danger getting directly involved. I take your silence as her being right. The tattooed boy opened his mouth to argue before growling and said, I thought so. The young Harris felt awareness in her body as she walked over and called out, is everyone okay? We're all good. Neon Team Funko called out, we're tired but alive. Sun yelled back. Coco and her team whistled. Rock Lee's energetic war cry hinted that they were doing well. Me and Ren are here. Nora called out, showing still so full of energy despite the gauntlet that they had just pushed through. But I'm out of ammo, and Ren's weapons are broken. The green-clad boy entirely raised his weapons to show the blades that had snapped off. I think we're going to need a little time. Weiss nodded and Tintin ran past her and towards the entrance to Beacon. The stick wielder called out as she approached. Is everyone okay? Sakura walked around the corner with Swai in her arms. Yeah, we're all here. Everyone's a little shaken up, but all right. Thank you for holding the line. I'm not sure what happened to Pira, Nikos, and that John boy, but I'm glad we have all of you. It shocked Weiss that those two would leave the fight for anything. That along with the fact Yang had run off, Blake hadn't come back, Ruby was nowhere to be found, and whatever situation Naruto was in, that worried all the civilians. She feared for the worst. Anyway, do we have a plan? Sakura asked. These people don't stop worrying, and she froze and stared off behind them. Weiss intended to turn around to see what had gotten her attention. Standing on top of the broken paladin, in the middle of all the recovery teams, were Sugetsu and Ruby's friend Jugo. The droopy white-haired boy looked disoriented by everything he was seeing as Jugo just stood tall and taciturn as usual. Where had those two been the whole time? Hey, welcome back. Sun waved to them. You know we could use some help with all these guys, right? I'm sorry. Sugetsu apologized and reached up to Jugo's neck. He slowly drew the zipper down on the baggy clothes that the large boy wore until they slipped off his body. When they did, Weiss and everyone else present were given the sight of the elaborate locks and braces that covered his body. Sugetsu turned his hand into water and shoved it into the lock until they opened them. I wish it didn't have to happen, but he's been waiting to let loose. The metal braces covered his body, slipped from his body, and collected over the broken heap of the paladin. Weiss's stomach turned and went colder when she saw the monstrosity in front of her. Jugo puffed out his chest, stretching the large patches of black skin and bone armor that covered his body as he opened his mouth of jagged, pointy teeth. He leapt off the paladin and flew straight down at Sun. The Monkey had raised his guard and jumped back, but the hybrid's foot slammed into his arm and sent him crashing into a pile of robot pieces. The civilians screamed in horror as she and the other students quickly drew their weapons. They didn't know what they were looking at, but whatever Jugo was, he was a threat. The group of hunters in training swarmed around Jugo as he stood prone, but in an instant he rushed aside, barreling through the perimeter they made until he found another person. Jugo singled out Nora as he attacked her. She spun her camera around and slammed it into his chest before he could get closer. The impact landed and the ground shook, but Jugo barely moved him. His knee flew up beneath the long handle of Nora's hammer before grabbing her head and headbutting her. Nora! He spun and tossed her into Ren's chest hard enough to send them flying. With another primal roar, he leapt across the battlefield to attack someone else. Everyone tried to stop him, Weiss including with her cliffs, but he evaded and slipped by their attacks. If he didn't just barrel through them. He crushed Flynn's trumpet in his hand and knocked the young students away. Neon swung into his back and created a layer of ice over his spine, but his arm shot back and caught her neck before she could slip away. Jugo raised her into the air before smacking her into the ground hard enough so she bounced. Bastard! Kiba started firing on the monstrosity, and this was the chance others took to take their shots as well. Accumulating in Coco, leveling her minigun at the anomaly and pelting every inch of his body with ammunition. And despite the assault of bullets, Jugo persevered and pressed on. He covered the remaining distance between them and reached out. His warped claws clamped down on the massive barrel of Coco's chain gun and stopped it from firing another shot. The fashionable upperclassman tried to pry her weapon away, but Jugo's grip tightened until it broke in his hand. Jugo backhanded Coco across the face and raised his arm to block Yatsuhashi's and Fox's simultaneous strikes. They pressed forward and started attacking Jugo, blocking their fast jabs and mighty swings with his forearms. The attacks simply struck the bone plates that covered him before he pushed them back. His hands snapped up and caught Velvet's leg before she could drop it on his head. The red funnel was struck in the stomach and then spiked into Fox's chest before he could get any closer. And just as Yatsuhashi tried to cleave him in half, the hybrid spun around and punched his sword so hard it dented under his fist and collided with the massive huntsman's sternum. The wire wrapped around his arm and caught in his bone plates before yanking him to the ground. Get him! Weiss saw Conqueror maneuver his wires around in order to keep Jugo stationary. The Sneers rushed in with Tintin at her side, and Tamari ran at the hybrid. She drew out her fans and formed a gale of wind that rushed over Jugo's body while he was stuck in place. If he had any aura, it no doubt distressed under the powerful gust, while scratches covered the plates around his body. He looked ready to pounce on the opponent his teammate had captured until the hulky man finally towards his body. Kagura was nearly yanked off his feet, but quickly found his balance again. However, that moment of struggle offered Jugo the chance to grab the wires, pull them in, and drag Kagura towards him. Tamari and Leo quickly acted and cut the wires, but had to quickly escape before Jugo crushed them. This was the worst possible scenario. This kind of enemy would be difficult to handle normally, but everyone here was exhausted and nearly drained of aura. As the weakest, this unprecedented enemy appeared to break them down. Jugo's head leaned back as he avoided the knife flying towards his ear. He turned to see her and Tenten stood together. The older girl's hand is still outstretched from throwing her weapon. She picked up her sticks and sprinted ahead as Weiss waved her glyphs around her comrade. One appeared between her and Jugo and allowed the bunny-haired girl to vault over the hybrid and land a glancing blow on the back of his head. Tenet landed behind Jugo and started landing quick strikes on his exposed back. The Hulking brood swiped behind him and forced the more agile fighters to jump back. She retreated into a spinning glyph and activated the dust in her weapons. Weiss summoned a series of glyphs surrounding Jugo that launched Tenten from one into another. Each one she bounced between as she landed a passing blow on the monster, leaving a burst of fire, ice, or lightning in her path. Jugo's malformed, uneven body jerked aside violently. With each blow they landed as he couldn't keep up with them. He opened his arms wide and took Tenten's enhanced charge straight into the chest. But his arms closed down and encircled the bunny-haired huntress while she was close. Tenten tried to slip out, but Jugo's hold was too strong and refused to release her. The large man rolled his head back and Tenten covered her forehead in steel as his head shot forward and slammed into hers. The hybrid was left stunned by the pain aching through his skull as Tenten gave a shaky smirk. It faded a second later when Jugo instead grabbed her head and slammed it into the ground before repeating the action over and over. "Stop it!" Weiss cried out as she launched the icicles that shattered against the behemoth's body. He looked her way, dropping Tenten as the older girl groaned on the ground before stalking towards Weiss. The Heiress felt a chill run through her body as she quickly jumped back and weaved a series of glyphs between her and Jugo. The hybrid quickly proved that despite his current state, he wasn't mindless as he slipped around her semblance and charged her. The any fireballs and icicles she summoned pelted his body, but failed to stop him. The focused blast of wind she pressed on him failed to push him back. With her offensive attacks failing and him avoiding her defensive, the young Heiress started to panic. She needed to fight more. She needed to help her friends. She needed something more. A giant blade slammed down on Jugo when he was close enough to her. Weiss was startled by the sudden attack and stared down at the flattening hybrid under the ice white blade. She slowly looked up over her shoulder and saw a glyph she had tried to use time and time again formed by her side with a giant sword and arm protruding from it. Was this a double crack? And Chatter drew her attention back as she looked back to see Jugo standing back up. The remains of the broken sword she summoned in his claws before they blurred forward. One clamped around her throat, one lifted her up, the other grabbing her rapier. The young huntress gasped before air as her sword failed to move a single inch under her grasp. With him close, Weiss finally had a chance to see Jugo's face closely. The crazed, vague presence in his eyes, the blotches of black skin as he grew closer to his mouth, the jagged, uneven rows of teeth that altered between a normal humans and a vicious beast. It was that mouth that slowly drew open and leaned forward, salivating and blowing hot air over her face as his tongue reached out. She felt it run along her cheek. Jugo's head jerked forward after he took several gunshots directly. "Hey, fucker!" Weiss struggled for breath, but looked over to see Kiba standing a few yards away with his tongue full smoking. "You done playing around? Because I'll give you a real fight." Weiss dropped to the ground and desperately sucked in air as Jugo rushed towards Kiba. The Heiress rubbed her throat gently as she heard rapid gunfire mixed with primal yelling. The young huntress looked over to see Kiba jumping away and weaving under Jugo's slashes while shooting at him between each dodge. Kiba stayed on the defensive while his aura was depleted and waiting for someone to come help him. Weiss grabbed her rapier and pulled herself up. Jugo slammed his shoulder into Kiba's chest and sent him crashing back into a paladin. He yelled and tried to guard himself before Jugo's claws flashed forward and pierced his throat. There were gasps around them as blood seeped from Kiba's mouth and dripped through the claws in his neck. Jugo drew in closer and roared in his victim's face until the end of Kiba's tongue pressed against the bottom of his jaw. The jet on the other side flared up and lifted Jugo off of his feet, turning him in the air until Kiba slammed him into the ground. As he was pinned, Kiba pulled the trigger again, releasing another wave of gunfire at point-blank range into the hybrid's face while the claws were still in his throat. A powerful rush of water knocked him off of Jugo and sent him tumbling to the ground. Suigetsu ran over and picked his comrade up before dragging him away. Wise tried to follow Kiba. She paused and looked back as Tintin dropped by her teammate's side. Some of the others started giving chase to the two traitors while Wise ran back over to check on her friend. When she reached him, she looked down in horror to see him struggle for air as blood spilled from his neck and mouth. Tintin reached for his hand and tried to keep him still as he convulsed on the ground. Neon was quick to come over as well, tears in her eyes and crying out his name. A few others looked on in horror as Wise shook her head. Help! She yelled, "Help! Someone! We need help! Medic!" She called out hopelessly, but was surprised when Sakura came running over with a first aid kit. She knelt down and ordered the others away as she paled at the sight of his injury. "Oh, can you help him?" Nora asked suddenly. "I don't know. This is bad. We need more help than I." The pink-haired girl paused and shook her head. "No, I can do this. You did your part. Let me do mine." She started going to work as Weiss and the others could only watch helplessly as their friends hung in the balance. "Hunting, why did you turn your back on your people? Did you gain some kind of pleasure to being a traitor? Of course not." Well, Blake blocked his sword and the slash that followed before jumping back up with Shadow. "I wanted to have fun, but how the White Fang is doing it is wrong. So quick to lose your stomach." He sheathed his sword and enjoyed again, releasing a massive wave of energy that left a cut over the entire cafeteria. She only barely dodged him. "Not that long ago, you had still yourself to do whatever it took, but then you suddenly lost your nerve and ran away. I was tired of how we were hurting people. I was tired of sacrificing my consciousness and soul just to terrorize others. I told you that time after time, but you brushed it off. It said it was just a necessary sacrifice for the cause. We have to give a choice of ourselves. We have to give a piece of ourselves away in order to see our dreams through. A dream of peace and equality can't be built on a foundation of suffering and revenge. You're right, Blake. The dream of equality was always impossible." Adam slowly walked towards her as his blade dragged along the ground. We protested for the idea that we weren't a lower class. We fought to show them that we were so much more. We thought all of this would change their minds. But as long as these people have an idea set in their heads, they refuse to ever budge. As long as they're convinced that we're beneath them, then that's all we'll ever be. His mouth twisted. "So why not put them at the bottom and let that become the new reality?" Blake looked at him in horror. "Adam, subjugation and judging humans like that isn't the answer. You're forfeiting any right to decide the betterment of our people when you abandoned us and stood with the humans instead. I became a huntress," Blake argued. "I wanted to help people, not just faunus. I wanted to prove that faunus were strong enough to help everyone. You ran away, Blake. Don't try to make an excuse when you got scared." Adam shook his head. "You ran and hid here with Kushina's son, another traitor, with a Schnee girl, the daughter of the SDC of all people." He said that with particular venom, and her face pinched as she knew he was glaring at her with his broken eyes. "And though she a survivor, you made friends with traitors, enemies, and monsters here in your little hideaway. You've changed since you abandoned me. Adam, but you can still come back. I know that warrior I fought besides is still somewhere inside. I just have to peel away the cowardice and foolishness. I have to get rid of everything that makes her weak." He stepped forward. "I just have to get rid of everyone that turned you into this." Blake's eyes hardened, her grip tightening. In a state of rage, she rushed forward and flipped over his head. She tried to attack his blind spot, but his sword swung up to parry her attacks. When she landed, she tried to attack again, but had to block the shotgun blast. He fired blindly behind him. He followed with a side kick that sent her flying back into a wall, and then she was pinned to it with a blade that tore through her aura and pierced into her admin. "This is the first step," he whispered to her, soft and gentle, like a lover as he kept her pinned. "You just need to power through it. It might seem tough, but I promise it's freeing to be rid of the ones that keep you chained. You'll feel free when I separate Kushina's son's head from his body. You'll see the light when I cut the Schnee's girl in half. You'll feel at home when we're tearing that Uchiha boy limb from limb." "Adam," Blake whimpered, stop. I can't. He shook his head. I said I'd bring you back after I removed your weaknesses, and I'm a man of my word. Blake, where are you? Yang. Blake nearly cried out her partner's name, but kept her lips shut. She didn't want to drag her into Adam's path, into this mess, but her former partner seemed to realize what was happening as he snickered. Your new partner, the scapegoat, wonderful. I can start right away. Blake nearly begged him not to do anything, but he dragged his sword out of her, and she let out an involuntary cry of pain in response. That cry was loud enough to echo to the cafeteria, to lead Blake straight to them. Blake! Yang called out as she saw her huddled on the ground. Her eyes turned to the red-haired bull and burned a flaming crimson. What did you do to her? Just bringing her back to the light. You're helping her by hurting her. Flames rushed off Yang's hair as she cocked her gauntlets in anger. I'll kill you. No, Yang. Blake called out. Blake launched herself forward and swung for Adam's head with a haymaker. The Fawny stuck aside as she landed and turned to him again. She fired shot after shot to keep him on edge. After rushing to attack, she threw a flurry of punches, and Adam blocked each one with his sword. With the ballistic roar, Yang turned her fist down and sent a shockwave across the ground that threw her into the air and nearly knocked Adam down. She dropped it down on him from above, ready to crack his skull open with her fist. His blade struck first. 1 second, her partner was descending with the kind of power that destroyed an Atlas mech and obliterated Grim. The next, she hit the ground, knocked out from the pain as color left her cheeks. And not a second later, her arm plopped on the floor behind her. After a moment, Blake realized what happened and gasped in horror. She dragged herself to her partner's side. Her stab wound screamed in pain with each movement, but she noticed herself forward. But she forced herself forward until she was by Yang's side. Her partner was unconscious and her expression twisted in discomfort. There was no other wounds on her body, but her arm. It ended in a stump, and the blood coming off of it flooded with the remains of her aura. The wound, trying to understand how it could have been hurt, through her natural protection. She immediately pulled out her bow and tied it in an effort to stem the blood flow. Time to move, Blake. I haven't finished up yet. The cat fungus looked up as Adam slowly drew closer. She picked up Yang and hugged her closely to her chest as she tried to stand back up. The actor put too much stress on her wound and she nearly toppled over. Are you serious? You'd go this far for a human? For some girl you barely know? Shut up! Blake cried. Damn you! Don't blame me, Blake. You used this girl as a crutch, as a shield to protect yourself from your own cowardice. You dragged her into all of this. Adam raised his sword. If you want someone to blame yourself. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to abandon Yang. Even as Adam's sword rose, she cradled her partner's head to her chest and didn't let go. A red blade descended down. A red blade intercepted it. The clash of swords rung out to the cafeteria as Adam was knocked back. Blake looked up in shock at the sudden appearance of the stranger between them and their assailant. The woman had long black hair that covered her back, with a red sword in a large sheath that appeared to have some kind of revolver in it. The mysterious woman was clad in black clothes and red plate armor over her body, and the most striking feature was the grim mask that covered her entire face. The woman looked back at her. Run. Even with the questions running through her head, Blake didn't waste another second. She cradled Yang closely, pushing through the pain in her side. That begged she sit down and rush at the cafeteria. Adam's sword flashed forwards again and was blocked by the mysterious assailant's sword. They struggled against each other before separating again. Adam looked over and saw Blake had disappeared along with his prey. He stared at the woman across from him. They won't be safe for long. Perhaps I'll find that girl again. Someday we'll come across each other, and when we do, I'll finish what I started here. Maybe you will, the woman said, detached from the situation as she swung her sword down and created a portal in the air. And when that day comes, either she'll be strong enough to face you or not. That'll be up to her. She walked through the portal and disappeared, leaving Adam standing alone in the flames and rubble of the Beacon's cafeteria. The bull Fawnies took a deep breath and sheathed his weapon. He had done enough today. With the revolution, revelations, and reunions, it was time for a break. Time to let Cinder finish things up. Hunting. John, promise me that whatever happens when I come out, you'll stay by my side. Pyrrha begged quietly as they walked behind Osmond. No matter how I act or what might happen, please don't leave me. He looked so confused by her request. She wished that she had the time to explain what was happening. She wished she had time to talk with him about everything. But now she was drawing ever closer to possibly vanishing. The moment arrived as they reached the end of the vault, and all the fear Pyrrha had been ignored suddenly rushed into her. Oh, what is this? John asked as he stared at the unconscious body of the scarred woman in the machine. He looked between them for answers. Who is that? Mr. Arca, I need you to stand back. Miss Nikos. Osmond worked on the controls before looking back at her. Please step in. Pyrrha, she looked back at him one last time and memorized his face. Not him. Please don't forget him. She stepped into the machine and waited silently as they closed around her. She looked around the window and out into the vault. To John staring at this all in confusion. To Osmond asking her if she was ready. She shook her. She took a breath, remembered everything that Hope would be waiting for her, and nodded. The pain followed. It was terrible, excruciating, like all the heat from her body was being pulled out from her blood until there was ice, only to be replaced by fire. It was as if every portion of her body was crying out and fighting itself. And this was what meant to have someone else's aura, their very soul, forced to merge with another. As she thrashed around and screamed, she forced her eyes open to look through the window. When she did, she saw John crying out for her and shaking Osmond. The headmaster knocked his hand away and yelled something back as they argued, but they froze as something appeared that grabbed their attention. John drew his weapon and Osmond turned his cane around in his hand. Through the pane, Pyrrha looked over to the shadows and saw her emerge. The woman from Mistral, Cinder. She drew a handful of arrows and started firing them. When they impacted, they exploded violently and burst the flames. John tried to push through it all as Osmond broke every arrow that came his way. Cinder drew another arrow and released her hold on it. The projectile sailed through the air at incredible speeds. As it started to glow orange and burn, John saw the arrow coming and raised his shield up to block it. The burning, speeding arrow pierced through the top corner of his shield and sailed forward unfeathered. Osmond saw the arrow flying and tried to swing his cane out to break it. But it shattered through the glass window of the pod and embedded itself in Ember's eye. Time seemed to freeze as everything came crashing down. The transfer machine started to malfunction. Pure screams of pain faded in the thrashing metal. The light gathered around the machine shone brighter than ever before, and Cinder's eyes glowed with a fluttering golden flame. And chapter 81.